You know what hurts more than physical pain? It's when the person you gave your whole life to looks you in the eye and tells you that someone else deserves happiness more than you do. That your suffering doesn't matter because it's not convenient for them. That's what betrayal really feels like. Not a knife in the back, but a slow, deliberate suffocation of your worth as a human being. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. My name is Mari Tanaka and I'm 55 years old. I live in a small 2DK apartment in Chiba Prefecture, where the summer humidity seeps through old walls and the sound of the nearby train line rattles through thin windows every few minutes. This isn't where I thought I'd be at this stage of my life. 20 years ago, I owned a modest house with a small garden where I grew vegetables and chrysanthemums. I had a husband who loved me, a daughter I was proud of, and dreams of grandchildren playing in that same garden. But life has a way of stripping you down to nothing piece by piece, until you're left staring at the skeleton of who you used to be. My husband Kenji died of cancer when Yuki was 19. The medical bills ate through our savings like acid through metal. I sold the house, downsized, worked double shifts as a hospital nurse just to keep Yuki in university. I told myself it was temporary, that once she graduated, got established, maybe got married, we'd rebuild what we lost together. That was my first mistake. Believing that sacrifice creates gratitude instead of entitlement. Yuki did well for herself, pharmaceutical studies, then an MBA, then a job at a foreign pharmaceutical company that went global 3 years later. She bought a condo in a Minato-ku tower, one of those sleek modern things that looks like a glass box but costs 100 million yen. She married Hiroto, an investment banker whose family owns half of Tokyo's prime real estate. They had the kind of wedding that gets featured in magazines, where the flowers alone cost more than I made in 6 months. I was proud of her. Even when the visits became phone calls and the phone calls became line messages and the messages became awkward interactions during Obon and New Year, I told myself this was normal. This was what happened when children grew up and became successful. They didn't need their mothers cluttering up their pristine lives with reminders of struggle and loss. But I needed her. God, how I needed her. It started with my knees 3 years ago. A dull ache that I ignored because I couldn't afford to acknowledge it. Working as a care assistant meant long hours on my feet and health insurance that covered the bare minimum through the high-cost medical system. The ache became pain. The pain became agony. And the agony became a constant companion that followed me through every waking moment. I went to the local clinic first, then to a specialist who told me I needed knee replacement surgery. Both knees, actually, and that without it I'd be using a wheelchair within 2 years. The surgery would cost 2 million yen. My insurance would cover most of it through the high-cost medical care system, but the remaining amount and rehabilitation costs would still be substantial. In the meantime, I could manage with pain medication and physical therapy. Manage? As if managing was living. I called Yuki that night. It was the first time I'd asked her for help since she graduated university. "Mom, 200,000 yen is a lot of money," she said. And I could hear Hiroto's voice in the background. Something about dinner plans. "And honestly, you're being a little dramatic. People live with knee pain all the time. Have you tried supplements?" Supplements? While I could barely stand long enough to help the elderly residents I cared for. Yuki, I can barely walk. I had to take unpaid leave from work because I can't. Look, Mom, I know it's hard, but Hiroto and I have our own financial obligations right now. We're looking at maybe buying a vacation house in Karuizawa. And with the market the way it is, a vacation house in Karuizawa, while her mother was dissolving pain medication in her morning tea, just to make it through the day. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. On Friday, I saw the photos on Hiroto's mother's Instagram. Her posing in a Ginza luxury beauty clinic, showing off her completely transformed face. The caption read, "Thanks to my wonderful son-like son-in-law for making this dream come true. Feeling 20 years younger. Blessed, cha family first, Chanch knew me." I stared at that photo for 20 minutes. Hiroto's mother, 58 years old, former flight attendant, owner of 2 homes and a successful widowed life. Getting a 3 million yen total beauty treatment courtesy of my daughter's husband. The same husband who said people live with knee pain all the time. I called her immediately. "Yuki, I saw your mother-in-law's post." Silence. "Then, Mom, that's different." "Different how?" "She's been really struggling with her self-esteem since her husband died. She deserves to feel good about herself. And I don't deserve to walk? Mom, you're being unfair. It's not the same thing at all. But it was exactly the same thing. It was about priorities. It was about who mattered and who didn't. It was about the fact that my daughter's family had 3 million yen to spend on making her mother-in-law feel pretty, but not even 200,000 yen to help her own mother walk without screaming. I hung up the phone and sat in my small kitchen, looking out at the concrete apartment buildings where laundry hung like white flags of surrender. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking about the pain in my knees. I was thinking about something much sharper, much cleaner. I was thinking about what my daughter had just taught me about family loyalty, about how love was conditional, about how sacrifice was forgotten the moment it became inconvenient. And I was thinking about what I was going to do with that lesson. The next morning, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in months' clarity. The fog of pain medication and self-pity had lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp focus that cut through everything like a blade. I made green tea, real loose-leaf tea, not the cheap tea bags I'd been using to save money, and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote what I know about my daughter. Yuki loved her image. Everything about her life was curated for maximum impression. The condo, the designer bags, the husband, the social media presence that showed her at pharmaceutical conferences and luxury hotels. She'd built her identity around being successful, generous, and family-oriented. The kind of woman who posted respectful tributes to her dead father and Mother's Day, messages about how I was her inspiration. All lies, of course, but lies that her friends, colleagues, and social circle believed completely. I understood something that morning that I'd been too hurt and desperate to see before. My daughter's greatest fear wasn't losing money or even losing Hiroto. It was losing the story she told about herself. The story where she was the hero, the good daughter, the woman who'd risen above her humble beginnings to become someone important. What would happen to that story if people knew the truth? I spent the morning making phone calls, not to ask for help. I was done begging, but to gather information. I called Yuki's old university friends, her co-workers, people who knew her from the exclusive gym where she and Hiroto worked out. Casual conversations, catching up, asking about their families, their lives. "Oh, Mari-san, we see Yuki all the time at the company events," said Jennifer Walsh, whose husband worked at the same pharmaceutical company. "She's always talking about you, how proud she is of how strong you are. She said you were handling your health issues like a true professional." Handling my health issues like a true professional. While I was rationing pain pills and walking with a cane I'd bought at a discount store. "She mentioned you were considering some kind of surgery," Jennifer continued, "but that you were being really brave about waiting for the right timing." The right timing? As if there was ever a right time to live in agony. Every conversation was the same. Yuki had been telling people that I was fine, that I was toughing it out, that I was too proud to accept help. She'd painted herself as the concerned daughter with the stubborn mother who refused to let her contribute to medical expenses. More lies, but effective ones. By noon, I had a complete picture of my daughter's social and professional network. I knew who respected her, who envied her, who would be most interested in knowing the truth about her character. I also knew exactly how much her reputation was worth to her everything. I spent the afternoon documenting everything. Screenshots of Hiroto's mother's Instagram posts showing their lavish lifestyle. Photos of the beauty clinic recovery, where she thanked her wonderful son-like son-in-law repeatedly. Bank records showing my own financial struggles. Medical bills I couldn't pay. The letter from the surgeon explaining why I needed the surgery urgently. I also wrote down every conversation I'd had with Yuki over the past 2 years. Every time she'd brushed off my concerns, every excuse she'd made, every time she'd changed the subject when I mentioned my pain. I had a good memory for humiliation. But I wasn't ready to act yet. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. That piece came 3 days later in the form of my colleague, Kazuko Sato. Kazuko was 60, divorced, and had been working at the same care facility as me for 8 years. She was one of those women who'd raised 3 kids on her own, worked in healthcare most of her adult life, and had opinions about everything from local politics to the proper way to care for elderly patients. She was also the only person who'd noticed that I was struggling. "Mari-chan, you look terrible," she said, standing in my apartment doorway with a container of homemade soup. "And don't tell me you're fine, because I can see you wincing every time you move." I let her in because I was tired of being alone with my anger. She sat at my kitchen table, looked around at the pill bottles and medical bills scattered across the counter, and asked the question no one else had bothered to ask: what do you need? I told her everything. Not the sanitized version I'd been giving people, but the truth. The pain that woke me up every night. The fact that I'd had to reduce my working hours because I could no longer do the job properly. The humiliation of asking my successful daughter for help, and being told that her mother-in-law's vanity was more important than my mobility. Kazuko listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what pisses me off most about this?" she finally said. "It's not that your daughter is selfish. Lots of kids are selfish. It's that she's a coward. She could have just said she didn't want to help you, but instead she's out there lying about it, making herself look good while you suffer." She was right. The selfishness I could have forgiven eventually. But the lies, the way she'd stolen my narrative and twisted it to make herself the victim of my stubbornness, that was unforgivable. "What are you going to do about it?" Kazuko asked. "I don't know yet." But I was lying. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just wasn't sure I was ready to burn every bridge to do it. Kazuko made the decision for me. "I'm starting a crowdfunding campaign," she announced. "Tonight. And I'm going to tell the truth about what's happening here." "Kazuko no. You don't understand." I understand perfectly. You're protecting a daughter who wouldn't help you if you were dying." That stops now. She was already pulling out her phone, typing rapidly. "What's your daughter's full name? And her husband's? I want to make sure people know exactly who we're talking about." I could have stopped her, should have stopped her, but as I watched her fingers moving across the screen, creating the post that would change everything, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years' anticipation. Mari Tanaka is a 55-year-old woman who worked double shifts for 20 years to put her daughter through university, Kazuko typed, reading aloud as she wrote. She sold her house to pay for her education and her husband's cancer treatment. Now she needs knee replacement surgery and can't afford it. While her daughter Yuki Tanaka of Minatoku just paid 3 million yen for her mother-in-law's cosmetic treatments. Share this story. Help us show Mari that real family isn't about blood. It's about showing up when it matters. She attached photos I'd shown her me with my cane, struggling to get up from a chair, the medical bills scattered across my table, and then, because Kazuko was nothing if not thorough, screenshots from the mother-in-law's Instagram showing their wealth. "Kazuko, this will destroy her." She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty to have patience for its hypocrisies. Good. Some people need to be destroyed. Maybe that's the only way they learn what matters. She hit publish before I could say another word. Within an hour, the post had 50 shares. Within 6 hours, it had 500. By the next morning, it had gone viral in the way that only stories about family betrayal can go viral, shared by angry mothers, disappointed children, and everyone who'd ever felt abandoned by someone they'd sacrificed for. The donations started small: 500 yen, 1,000 yen, 2,000 yen. But they kept coming. Strangers who saw their own stories reflected in mine. People who understood what it meant to be discarded after a lifetime of giving. More importantly, the comments started coming, and every single one of them mentioned Yuki by name. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Yuki, of course, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet. I wanted to watch the fire spread first. Wanted to see how much of her carefully constructed image would survive the heat. I had my answer by evening. The crowdfunding had raised 120,000 yen in less than 24 hours. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching my daughter's reputation burn down around her, one share at a time. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Dr. Patricia Yamada, the orthopedic surgeon who'd been waiting for my insurance paperwork, suddenly had an opening when the crowdfunding hit 450,000 yen. Funny how money made medical miracles possible. "Tanaka-san, I have to ask," she said during our pre-op consultation. "The media attention around your case, are you comfortable with that level of exposure?" I was more than comfortable. I was thriving. The story had grown legs, as they say. Local news stations picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national blogs that specialized in family drama and social justice. The comment section of every article was a battleground between people defending Yuki, "We don't know the whole story," and people calling for her head. What kind of monster abandons her mother? But the most devastating coverage came from an unexpected source. Yuki's own professional network. Someone had leaked information about her financial situation to a pharmaceutical industry blog. Suddenly, everyone knew exactly how much money Yuki Tanaka made, how much her condo was worth, how much she'd spent on her mother-in-law's treatments. The numbers were stark, undeniable, and utterly damning. Pharmaceutical executives started distancing themselves from her publicly. The Professional Women's Association she belonged to quietly asked her to step down. Her company, facing pressure from employees who were sharing the story internally, suggested she take a leave of absence until the situation resolved itself. Yuki called me 47 times in 3 days. I answered on the 48th call. "Mom, please, you have to make this stop." Her voice was different, smaller, desperate. The confident corporate executive was gone, replaced by a frightened girl who'd finally realized that actions had consequences. "Stop what, Yuki?" "The posts, the interviews, all of it. People are calling me a monster. They're saying I hate my own mother. Don't you?" Silence. "Then, Mom, that's not. I never meant. You paid 3 million yen for your mother-in-law's beauty treatments while I was living on instant noodles and generic pain pills. What would you call that? It wasn't like that. You're making it sound..." "I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm telling people exactly what happened. If you don't like how it sounds, maybe you should have thought about that before you did it." "Mom, please. Hiroto's family is furious. His father is threatening to cut our investment portfolio. My career is." I hung up. Let me be clear about something I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no maternal instinct to protect the child I'd raised. Those feelings had died the day Yuki chose her mother-in-law's vanity over my ability to walk. What remained was a cold satisfaction watching her learn what abandonment felt like. The surgery went perfectly. Bilateral knee replacement, 6 hours under anesthesia, and when I woke up, I was surrounded by flowers and cards from strangers who'd followed my story. Kazuko was there, of course, along with 3 other colleagues I barely knew but who'd been quietly watching out for me for months. Yuki was not there. Neither was Hiroto. Not that I'd expected them. But Takeshi Yamamoto was there. I met Takeshi at the Community Senior Support Group 2 weeks after surgery. He was 68, a retired postal worker who'd been managing diabetes and kidney dialysis for the past year. He had gentle eyes, weathered hands, and the kind of quiet strength that comes from facing life's challenges without complaint. "You're the lady from the news," he said the first day I saw him struggling with his walking exercises. "I'm the lady who got tired of being treated like garbage by her family," I corrected. He smiled. A real smile, not the polite kind people gave when they didn't know what else to do. "Good for you. My son and daughter keep asking if I saw your story. They're worried I'm going to start a crowdfunding campaign if they don't visit me enough. Are they good to you? They're the best children a man could ask for. Lost their mother 2 years ago, and they've been taking care of their old man ever since. Sometimes I think they care too much." I couldn't imagine what that felt like. Takeshi and I became friends gradually, the way lonely people do when they recognize something familiar in each other's faces. Not the loneliness. His children visited constantly, but the understanding that life could change everything in an instant, that the body you'd trusted for decades could betray you, leaving you dependent on others in ways you'd never imagined. The difference was that Takeshi's others had shown up. Mine had not. "What are you going to do when you get better?" he asked one afternoon as we worked on our exercises side by side. "I don't know. Go back to my apartment, I guess. Try to find work that doesn't require so much standing." That sounds lonely. It was lonely, but lonely was better than being disappointed by people who were supposed to love you. "What about you?" "My children want me to move in with one of them. Kenji's got a small house with a separate room, and Akiko's got space too. They're fighting over who gets to take care of me." He shook his head with fond exasperation. Good problems to have, I suppose. Good problems. I tried to remember what those felt like. 3 months into rehabilitation, Takeshi introduced me to his children. Kenji was 40, a physical therapist with 2 teenage daughters and a wife who worked at the local hospital. Akiko was 38, a social worker with 1 young son and a husband who ran a small construction company. They were the kind of people who brought homemade food to their father's therapy sessions and argued about whose turn it was to drive him to appointments. They welcomed me into their family orbit without question or judgment. Kenji's wife brought me soup when I had a cold. Akiko's son made me origami cranes that I hung in my apartment window. They included me in family gatherings and holiday celebrations as if I'd always been there. It was what family was supposed to feel like. Meanwhile, my real family was imploding spectacularly. The crowdfunding had raised 680,000 yen by the time I finished rehabilitation. The excess money went to other people in similar situations. Elderly parents abandoned by successful children, families facing medical bankruptcies, people whose own children had forgotten what sacrifice looked like. I made sure every donation was publicized. Every recipient was interviewed. Every story was tied back to the original narrative about Yuki and her priorities, the gift that kept on giving. Yuki's life was unraveling with surgical precision. The pharmaceutical company she'd invested her career in suggested she transfer to a smaller branch office. Her and Hiroto's condo went on the market. Though at their price point in Minato-ku, it wasn't moving quickly. Hiroto had been asked to take a temporary leave from his investment firm when the family scandal started affecting client relationships. Hiroto's mother, meanwhile, had become a social media pariah. Her Instagram posts about her wonderful son-like son-in-law had been screenshotted and shared thousands of times, usually with comments about her selfishness and vanity. She'd made her profile private, then deleted it entirely when people started showing up at her tennis club to confront her. The irony was delicious. She had gotten her beauty treatments to feel better about herself, but now she couldn't show her face anywhere without being recognized as the woman whose vanity had cost a daughter her mother. On the evening of my final rehabilitation session, as I walked unassisted to the community center parking lot for the first time in 3 years, Takeshi caught up with me. "Mari-san, wait." I turned, and he was standing there with a small velvet box in his hands. "I know this might seem fast, and I know you've got every reason not to trust family anymore, but..." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small pearl. "Would you consider being part of mine?" I looked at this kind man who'd watched me rebuild myself from nothing, who'd introduced me to children who treated me better than my own daughter ever had, who was offering me something I'd thought was lost forever, a place where I belonged. "Takeshi-san, You don't have to answer now. But Kenji and Akiko, they love you already. The grandchildren ask about you every day. We're not perfect, but we show up for each other, always." I thought about Yuki, probably sitting in her expensive condo, wondering how her perfect life had crumbled so completely. I thought about Hiroto, learning that money and status were meaningless when your wife's reputation was destroyed. I thought about his mother, hiding from the consequences of her selfishness. Then I looked at Takeshi, at his hopeful face and gentle hands, at the family who'd embraced me without expecting anything in return. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I want to be part of your family." And for the first time in years, I smiled without calculating the cost. The dinner to celebrate Takeshi's recovery was held at Kenji's house on a Saturday evening in October. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasted sweet potatoes from a nearby vendor and the sound of children playing in the small park across the street. Kenji's modest home was decorated with warm paper lanterns that cast everything in a gentle glow. I wore a new dress, dark blue with small cherry blossom patterns, bought with money I'd earned from my own choices rather than begged for from an ungrateful daughter. My hair was styled in a neat bun, and for the first time in years, I felt like a woman rather than a burden. Takeshi's family had prepared a feast that reminded me of the family dinners I'd once dreamed of having. Kenji's wife Yumi had made her famous nikujaga and tempura, while Akiko brought homemade gyoza and chirashi sushi.
The grandchildren help set the table with the kind of excited energy that only comes from kids who feel completely secure in their family's love.
"Marioba-chan, you sit here," announced Akiko's son Kuta, patting the chair next to his. "I made you a special origami crane for your place." It was a perfectly folded crane made from gold paper, sitting on a small handwritten card that read, "Marioba-chan, welcome to our family," in careful hiragana. Oba-chan. The word hit me harder than I'd expected. Yuki had never given me grandchildren. She and Hiroto had been focusing on their careers for 10 years, which I now understood meant they'd never wanted children at all. Too messy, too expensive, too disruptive to their carefully curated lifestyle. But here I was, surrounded by children who'd already claimed me as their grandmother, who fought over who got to show me their latest school projects and help me with my rehabilitation exercises. "Kanpai, kanpai!" called out Kenji's teenage daughter, Miki, as we raised our glasses of sake and juice. Takeshi stood, his hands still showing slight tremors from the dialysis, but his voice steady and strong. A year ago, I thought my story was ending. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't work anymore, Couldn't see how I'd ever be the man my family needed me to be. He looked around the table at his children, his daughters-in-law, his grandchildren, all listening with the kind of attention that only comes from genuine love. But this family, my family, they didn't let me give up. They showed up every day, even when I was difficult, even when I was scared, even when I pushed them away because I was embarrassed about needing help. His eyes found mine across the table. And then I met someone else who was fighting her own battles. Someone who'd been abandoned by the people who should have shown up for her. Someone who taught me that family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who chooses to stay. The tears came then, unexpected and unwelcome. I'd spent months building walls around my emotions, constructing barriers of cold anger and calculated revenge. But sitting in that warm room, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love me without conditions or expectations, the walls cracked. "Mari-san," Takeshi continued, "you've shown me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that never bends, but the kind that breaks and rebuilds itself stronger. You've survived betrayal that would have destroyed lesser people, and somehow you've kept your heart open enough to let us love you." He moved around the table toward me, that small velvet box appearing in his hands again. "So I'm asking again, in front of all the people who matter most to me. Mari Tanaka, will you marry me? Will you let us be your family for real?" The children were bouncing in their seats with excitement. Yumi was crying openly. Akiko was taking photos with her phone. Kenji was grinning like he'd known this was coming all along. I looked at these faces, these people who'd embraced me completely, and made my choice. "Hi," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I want to be part of this family." The ring slid onto my finger perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The children cheered, the adults applauded, and for a moment I forgot about Yuki entirely. But only for a moment. My phone buzzed during dessert. A line message from an unknown number. "Mom, it's me. I got a new phone. Please, we need to talk. Everything is falling apart." I showed the message to Takeshi, who read it with the same expression he might use to examine a particularly unpleasant insect. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," I said. There's nothing left to say. But that wasn't entirely true. There was one more thing I wanted Yuki to understand. Later that evening, after the celebration had wound down and Takeshi had driven me back to my apartment, I was moving in with him the following week. I sat down at my computer and typed a response to my daughter's desperate message. "Yuki, you're right that everything is falling apart. Your career, your marriage, your reputation, all of it built on the lie that you're a good person. But here's what you need to understand: this isn't happening to you. This is happening because of you. Every consequence you're facing is the direct result of your own choices. You chose your mother-in-law's vanity over my pain. You chose your image over my reality. You chose comfort over character. Now you're learning what those choices cost." I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old Mari, the one who'd spent decades making excuses for her daughter's selfishness, wanted to soften the blow. But that Mari was dead, buried under years of neglect and betrayal. I'm getting married next month to a man who understands what family actually means. His children have shown me more love in 6 months than you've shown me in 6 years. His grandchildren call me Oba-chan and fight over who gets to help me in the garden. I have found my real family, and you're not part of it. Don't contact me again. I have nothing more to say to you, and you've proven you have nothing to offer me. Live with your choices, Yuki. I'm finally living with mine. I attached a photo from the evening, all of us around the dinner table. Laughing and happy, my engagement ring clearly visible as I raised my glass in a toast. I hit send before I could change my mind. My phone rang within minutes. Yuki, of course. I declined the call and blocked the number. Then I called Kazuko to tell her the news about my engagement. "It's about damn time," she said. "When's the wedding?" "Next month. Small ceremony, just family." "Good. Your real family?" Real family. The phrase that had once cut so deeply now felt like a badge of honor. Over the following weeks, as I prepared to move in with Takeshi and plan our simple wedding, the reports about Yuki's downfall continued to trickle in through the grapevine of neighbors and social media connections. Hiroto had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the truth. His family's money came with strings, and those strings didn't include supporting a wife whose reputation was in ruins. His mother, it turned out, had been the one pushing hardest for the separation, telling her son that he deserved better than a failed woman who can't even take care of her own mother. The irony was perfect. Hiroto's mother, whose cosmetic treatments had started this entire cascade of consequences, was now the one demanding that Hiroto abandon Yuki in her time of need. The woman who'd benefited from their misplaced priorities was the first to throw Yuki away when those priorities cost her everything. Yuki had moved into a small apartment in Saitama, an hour commute from her old life in Minato-ku. She'd found work as a part-time consultant for a small pharmaceutical company, making a fraction of her previous salary. The condo hadn't sold, and the mortgage payments were eating through what remained of her savings. I felt nothing hearing these updates. No satisfaction, no guilt, no urge to reach out and offer comfort. Yuki had made her choices and now she was living with them, exactly the way I'd lived with the consequences of trusting her to be the daughter I'd raised her to be. The difference was that I'd found people who actually deserved my trust. People who showed up, who stayed, who understood that love was demonstrated through action rather than declared through empty words. 3 days before my wedding, I received one final message from Yuki. Not a text this time, but a handwritten letter delivered to my old apartment building, forwarded by the postal service to Takeshi's address. Takeshi brought it to me without comment, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Do you want me to stay while you read it?" he asked. "No," I said. "This is something I need to finish alone." But I was wrong about that too. I opened Yuki's letter in Takeshi's kitchen, standing by the window that overlooked the small garden where I'd soon be planting vegetables. The handwriting was shakier than I remembered, desperate in its urgency. "Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm begging you to read this. I've lost everything. Hiroto is gone. The condo is gone. My career is destroyed. I'm living in a tiny apartment and working for people who used to be my subordinates. Everyone I thought was my friend has turned their back on me. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you, but I never meant for any of this to happen. I was trying to keep everyone happy, trying to balance everything, and I made the wrong choices. I see that now. Mom, you're all I have left. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please don't abandon me the way I abandoned you. I'm your daughter. That has to count for something. I heard you're getting married. I'm happy for you, truly I am. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm your blood, your only child. We can work through this. We can fix this. Please call me. Please give me one chance to make this right. I love you. Yuki. I read it twice, waiting for some flicker of the maternal instinct that had driven me to sacrifice everything for this woman. Waiting for the urge to protect her, to forgive her, to offer her the comfort she was begging for. Nothing came. Instead, I felt the same cold clarity that had sustained me through months of watching her world crumble. Yuki was still lying, even to herself. She hadn't made mistakes. She'd made deliberate choices that revealed her true character. She wasn't sorry for hurting me. She was sorry for the consequences of hurting her. And most telling of all, she was still trying to manipulate me with blood ties and guilt, still expecting me to save her from the mess she'd created, still believing that being my daughter entitled her to forgiveness she hadn't earned. I folded the letter and walked to Takeshi's small Buddhist altar. I lit a stick of incense, placed the letter on the offering plate, and watched it catch fire. The paper curled and blackened until nothing remained but ash. When Takeshi found me there an hour later, staring at the dying smoke, he didn't ask what the letter had said. He simply sat beside me and took my hand. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. The wedding took place the following Saturday in the community center where Takeshi and I had first met. It was everything Yuki's expensive magazine-worthy wedding hadn't been: intimate, genuine, and filled with people who actually cared about the couple getting married. I wore a simple cream-colored kimono that had belonged to Takeshi's late wife, altered to fit me perfectly by Akiko. Yumi and Akiko served as my attendants, while the grandchildren participated in the tea ceremony with varying degrees of success. The youngest 4-year-old Kuta spilled his tea but announced proudly, "I did the tea ceremony." Everyone laughed, including me. When was the last time I'd laughed at a wedding? At my own daughter's ceremony. I'd spent the entire day feeling like an outsider, watching Yuki perform the role of happy bride while treating me like an embarrassing relic from her past. Here, I was honored in the best possible way. Every speech mentioned how lucky Takeshi was to have found me, how I'd brought joy back into his life, how our love story proved that it was never too late for a new beginning. "To Mari-san and Takeshi-san," said Kenji, raising his cup for the final toast of the evening. for showing us that family isn't just about who you start with, it's about who you choose to finish with. Choose to finish with. The words echoed in my mind as I looked around at these faces. These people who'd chosen me as surely as I'd chosen them. After the ceremony, as we cleaned up the community center and prepared for Takeshi and me to leave for our honeymoon in Kyoto, Yumi pulled me aside. Mari-san, I want you to know something. Takeshi hasn't been this happy since before his wife got sick. You saved him in ways you probably don't even realize. He saved me too, I said. I know. That's what makes this so beautiful. We were interrupted by Miki, who came running up with her phone in her hand. Oba-chan, someone's been trying to call you all day. Your phone keeps buzzing in your purse. I'd forgotten about my phone entirely, caught up in the joy of the day. When I checked it, I found 15 missed calls from Yuki's blocked number and several from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails told the story Yuki had gotten more desperate as the day wore on, calling from friends' phones when she realized I'd blocked her, leaving increasingly frantic messages. Mom, please. I saw the wedding photos on social media. You look beautiful, and I'm happy for you, but I need to talk to you. Mom, it's me again. I know you're busy with your wedding, but I'm in real trouble here. Hiroto's lawyers are taking everything. I might lose my apartment. Mom, please, just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain everything. I know I can make you understand. The final message, left just an hour earlier, was different. Her voice was flat, emotionless, defeated. I get it now, Mom. You're never going to forgive me. You've got your new family, and I'm not part of it. I just want you to know that I realize what I lost. Not just your money or your help, but you. I lost my mother, and it's my fault. I hope you're happy with your new life. I really do. Goodbye. I saved the message, not out of sentiment, but as evidence. Evidence that Yuki finally understood the cost of her choices, that the consequences had reached their intended target, that justice had been served completely. Takeshi appeared at my elbow. Everything all right? Everything's perfect, I said, deleting the missed call notifications. Just some spam calls. We left for Kyoto the next morning, Takeshi driving while I watched the Japanese countryside roll past the windows. Somewhere behind us, Yuki was probably sitting in her small apartment, finally understanding what it felt like to be abandoned by the person who was supposed to love you unconditionally. I felt no urge to call her back, no maternal instinct to comfort her in her despair. Those feelings had died the day she chose her mother-in-law's beauty treatments over my knee surgery. What remained was the satisfaction of an equation balanced, a debt paid in full. 3 months later, I heard through Kazuko that Yuki had moved to Sendai, taking a job with a small healthcare company that specialized in elderly care. The irony was perfect. A woman who'd abandoned her own aging mother now worked in a field dedicated to caring for the elderly. I also heard that Hiroto had married a young financial analyst he met at a corporate event, someone young enough and successful enough to satisfy his mother's requirements for a daughter-in-law. The wedding photos showed his mother prominently featured, her surgically enhanced face beaming as she posed with her new, adequately accomplished daughter-in-law. Some people never learn, but that wasn't my problem anymore. So that's my story, the story of how I learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that sacrifice doesn't create gratitude, and that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop trying to save people who don't want to be saved. Yuki made her choices and I made mine. She chose image over substance, comfort over character, convenience over compassion. I chose to stop enabling her, stop protecting her from consequences, stop pretending that her selfishness was somehow my fault. Did I destroy my daughter's life? No. I simply stopped hiding the truth about who she really was. I stopped being complicit in her lies, stopped allowing her to use me as a prop in her performance of being a good person. The world did the rest. I'm 73 now, living in a house filled with laughter and grandchildren who call me every day just to say hello. Takeshi and I tend our garden together, travel when we feel like it, and fall asleep every night knowing we're surrounded by people who would show up for us no matter what. Yuki is 35, alone, and finally learning what I knew all along, that love isn't something you deserve simply by existing. It's something you earn through your actions, your choices, your willingness to sacrifice for others the way they've sacrificed for you. Some lessons come too late to matter. Hers did, and I sleep just fine with that.